Chapter 3. Rationing. The Garden of Eden is often referred to as paradise, but the Bible never speaks of it as such. Obviously, too, Adam and Eve did not consider Eden to be a paradise because they were eventually in rebellion against it. Modern man would be even less enthusiastic about Eden. Let us consider a few facts concerning the Garden of Eden. It was indeed an enclosed area containing all manners of fruits, vegetables, animals, birds, and the like. But it posed certain obvious problems. First of all, Adam faced Eden with no tools nor capital other than his own mind and body. Moreover, Adam was ordered to dress and keep the garden, no small task. Work obviously existed before the fall. Adam had to develop tools, means of harvesting, and means of storage. Anyone who has worked on a farm or tried gardening, even with the best of modern tools, will recognize Adam's problem. Granted that natural conditions before the fall were remarkable and very different from our world today, the text of Genesis 2 still makes very clear that Adam had a very considerable task on his hands. It is very doubtful that men today would trade places with Adam even for the prospect of the possibility of escaping death. Endless life with endless work is not the dream of modern man. It is very plainly, however, God's promise concerning the new creation, Revelation 22:3. Hell alone is portrayed as a place with no work. Second, as if this were not enough, Adam had another task, to name the animals, Genesis 2:19. Now, in the Bible, to name means to classify and to define. Thus, Adam was given another very considerable task, a scientific task. Since Adam began his work on day 1 of human history, perhaps day 6 of creation or soon thereafter, he had no reference library to go to, no hardware shop, and no human authorities to consult. He thus faced the most immense task in all history, with no capital other than himself and no tool other than himself. Third, with so great a task in his hands, naturally Adam felt lonely, Genesis 2:20. Yes, it was possible to feel lonely in the Garden of Eden. Thus, quote-unquote, paradise had at least both very heavy work as well as loneliness, so that we are again faced with the fact that modern man would not find Eden his cup of tea. But God had a remedy for Adam's loneliness, and her name was Eve. Adam now had somebody to talk to and also someone to talk to him. Eve was created to be his helpmeet, which meant also that he now had an additional responsibility. It was his duty to feed Eve, to guide her activities, and to plan their common life. Housing was obviously necessary because, while it did not yet rain in those days, a very heavy rain-like mist, quote, watered the whole face of the ground, Genesis 2:5 and 6. Sleeping on the ground under such circumstances would be difficult. Probably as soon as he was created, Adam was forced by natural conditions to develop some kind of housing. Since Genesis 4 tells us how, from the earliest days, farming, animal husbandry, construction, and blacksmithing, among other things, were developed to a considerable degree, very plainly Adam had quickly been forced to develop various arts and sciences. Thus, there is nothing in the Genesis account to give us the idea that Adam lay on the ground waiting for the fruit to fall into his mouth. There was as yet no curse upon the earth, Genesis 3:17-19, but there was work, hard work which required the application of intelligence and labor to the problems and tasks at hand. Eden had no sin, but it had problems. They required work for their solution, intelligent work. When that still active salesman, the tempter, stopped by to promise a no-work world, naturally Eve was interested, and so too was Adam. Capitalization and progress in God's world required work and thinking, very hard work and heavy thinking. There is a simpler way, said the salesman. Reach out to the forbidden tree, be your own God, determining for yourself what is good and evil, Genesis 3:5. The power of a god means fiat power. God speaks and it is done. He creates out of nothing by fiat legislation. Revolt, said the salesman, and as your own gods, embark on a course of fiat legislation and remake reality to suit yourselves. They bought the argument, and here we are today. Men talk about freedom as though they love it, but like Adam and Eve, they are in revolt against it. Freedom in God's world means mental and physical work and responsibility. Freedom is thus a moral fact, and who in this fallen world likes morality? Polls have shown again and again that most people favour wage and price controls, rationing, and fiat statist rule. Why not? The principle of man's fall is his belief that he can be his own God, and as a God, by his fiat word, create a new reality. All of this leads to rationing. Properly understood, rationing is an inescapable fact. The word ration comes from a Latin word meaning to reckon or calculate. Air cannot be rationed. God has so created it that it is available to all men. Men can pollute it or purify it, but they cannot ration it, although given the status mentality, someone is bound to try it someday. Automobiles and houses, however, are rationed, as are food, clothing, books, and most things in our lives. Rationing is by two means. First, rationing is by pricing. The price of goods is the oldest and only successful means of rationing in the world. Perhaps the greater majority of mankind would like a large, well-furnished and attractive house, but most do not have the price required to have one. In a free society, prices do the rationing. Men then work and save in terms of certain objectives. My wife and I long dreamed of a good home in the country. We went for years without many things, have always bought used cars, and we now have a place in the mountains. Others we know choose other things, including many things appealing to us, but not in our minds as important as our house and land. We have what we worked and planned for, what labour and intelligence led us to gain. By the price factor, we were rationed. Certain things, however, desired were off the market for us. We were limited in the variety of things we could buy, and in buying what we chose, limited as to how good a home or how much land we could acquire. Prices, thus, are the only effective means of rationing. Price determines at every point the quality of the item, the availability, and the quantity, among other things. Price represents both work and intelligence. Every item which enters the market represents work, but it also represents intelligence. Work and intelligence, however, do not guarantee sales. There are still a few excellent buggy makers in the United States. One is only 11 miles from us across the canyon, but the market for buggies is limited. The market sets the price and rations the goods. Thus, we have no glut of buggies. If a buggy maker overproduces buggies, he is soon bankrupt and out of business. The second means of rationing is by state controls. The state or the people of the state believe that everyone should have good housing and plenty of milk, eggs, and meat. Controls are introduced to place these and other items within the reach of all men. Why should any man even remotely face Adam's hardships? Of course, few, rather none today face as difficult a situation as he did. Modern man's situation is not as difficult, but it is, unlike Adam's, complicated by the fact of man's sin. Man wants the fiat world promised by that old salesman, and still promised by his present-day salesmen in church, state, and press. Why, in the world of plenty, should any man lack anything? Adam, of course, lacked everything, even in the Garden of Eden. He was not created to be a god, but to be a man, a creature, and his only means of capitalization was work and intelligence. The rationing Adam faced was a severe one because he inherited nothing from the past, whereas we are born into a world of houses, stores, tools, and accumulated knowledge. a tremendous and too seldom appreciated capitalization. When the state seeks to ration goods, it controls the market. It affects or controls prices and also wages. The result is shortages. Eggs or milk for all sounds fine, but until the state, like Christ, can multiply loaves and fishes, that is, create out of nothing, it destroys price and therefore production by its intervention. Who can afford to produce at a loss? But controls do lead to the destruction of rationing by price. As a result, in the name of providing for all are denied the availability of the goods. The issue in rationing is more than a moral issue, it is theological. The question is, who is God? The state has its answer to that question. The Christian cannot in good conscience agree. Capitalization is not by the quote-unquote divine state's fiat decree. The nature of reality has not changed since Adam's day. Man, by his fall, has indeed changed, but the reality he must live with remains the same.